Hello and welcome to V Concept College English. Today we want to talk about a simple way to know grammatical names and functions in WAEC comprehension. In WAEC comprehension, you will normally be given questions under the passage, and those questions are numbered from A, B, and H. Now, question A to are based on direct and indirect. That is, under question A to E, you're going to be asked questions that are directly based on the story told in the passage. But today we want to focus on the rest parts of the question, that is F, G, and H. And like I said in my video on how to know figures of speech, I identified F as questions that are based on figures of speech. We dealt with this in our previous video. In case you have not seen it, you may post the link down below this very video. Then I did also say that question G is based on grammatical names and functions of expressions. While question H is based on what? Replacement of words. But today we want to discuss grammatical names and functions. That is, how to know grammatical names and functions. Now, let's take on the first one. Adjectival phrase / clause. Adjectival phrase / clause. What are adjectival phrases and what are adjectival clauses? And how do we identify them when they come in WAEC comprehension? Before we look at the adjectival element that is contained here, let's first of all ask ourselves what phrases and clauses are. A phrase is a group of words that does not contain a final verb, while a clause is a group of words that contains a final verb. A phrase is a group of words that does not contain a final verb, while a clause is a group of words that contains a final verb. Alright, this is important because whatever expression they are going to give to you in WAEC, okay, will either be a phrase or a clause. So when you look at the group of words that have been highlighted or italicized or brought under the passage, okay, if the words contain a final verb, then you say it's a clause. If the words do not contain a final verb, then you said the expression is a phrase. Alright, now, having established that, let's now look at adjectival. When you now attach adjectival to a group of words, what are we talking about? We call adjectival clause or adjectival phrase a relative clause or a relative phrase. So all adjectival clauses are relative clauses. Adjectival clauses are relative clauses. What that means is that they are introduced with a relative pronoun. They are introduced with a relative pronoun, okay? Like who, whose, whom, which, or that. Please take note of that. When an expression comes in WAEC comprehension and they ask you to state its grammatical name, you look at it very closely. If it starts with what? Who, or whose, or whom, or which, or that, then you are going to say that it is an adjectival clause. That is, if it has a final verb, or that it is an adjectival phrase if it does not have a finite verb. So this is what we mean by adjectival clauses. Remember when I was introducing this class, I did say that we have I1, that is I, and then I are. So in the I part of the question, they will ask you to state the grammatical name of the expression, Then in the II part of the question, they'll ask you to state the function. Right. Function. All adjectival clauses modify the noun, okay, that they come after. An adjectival clause modifies a noun or a pronoun. An adjectival clause itself is called a dependent clause. Remember, a sentence is in the form of a main clause plus a subordinate clause. A sentence is equal to main clause plus subordinate clause. So here, the adjectival clause that you are going to be given, or adjectival phrase, is going to be the form of a subordinate what clause or a dependent clause. Okay? So that it will be modifying the noun that is in the main clause. And that is usually the noun that appears before the clause begins in an expression. Let's look at an example. Now, here is an example before us. I enjoy writing about language, which I do every single day. Okay, and we are asked to identify the underlined clause or phrase. First of all, you ask yourself, is it a clause or it is a phrase? Which I do every single day. I do is a verb. Therefore, this underlined part of the expression is a clause. Then, what word does it start with? Okay? It starts with the word which. And any clause that starts with which is an adjective. So automatically we are going to say that this is what? An adjectival clause. This is an adjectival clause because it has a verb and it starts with what? Which. And any clause that starts with which is an adjectival clause. So, which I do every single day. As an adjectival element, it only serves to modify the noun, okay, that it comes after. And of course, the noun here is what? Is language. The noun is language. So, the function is that it modifies language. It's always the noun that comes before them. That is the noun that comes before the adjectival clause. So, let's now move forward to adverbial phrases stroke clauses. Adverbial phrase / clause. What are adverbial phrases and adverbial clauses? An adverbial phrase or adverbial clause is a clause that acts as an adverb to modify the lexical verb that is in the main clause. Adverbial phrase or clause is a group of words that acts as an adverb to modify the lexical verb in the main clause of a sentence. So that is the definition of adverbial phrase / clause. Now let's talk about the functions. All adverbial phrases or clauses, okay, perform a single function, and that is what is already contained in the definition we provided here. They modify the lexical verb that is contained in the main clause of a sentence. Now, having established that the function of any adverbial phrase or clause is to modify the lexical verb that is in the main clause, okay, the next thing we want to talk about is how to identify them in words, in expression, that when they are given to you in WAEC comprehension. So, if the group of words, okay, begin with where, then it is adverbial phrase or clause of place. If the group of words begin with when, then it is adverbial phrase or clause of time. If the expression begins with unless, or it begins with until, or it begins with if, or it begins with only if, then the name of the expression is adverbial phrase or clause of condition. If the expression begins with because or so that, then it is an adverbial phrase or clause of what? Reason. If the expression begins with though or although, then it is an adverbial phrase or clause of what? Concession. Okay? And then finally, if the expression begins with as or like, then it is adverbial phrase or clause of what? Manner. Now, let's look at a critical example, okay, to illustrate what we have just discussed. Example, she addressed the crowd as she had practiced in the mirror. So, when you are asked to state the grammatical name of this underlined expression, the next thing you ask yourself is, what is the first word in the expression? As. And then, when an expression begins with as, it is what? Adverbial phrase or clause of manner. So when you want to state the function, you have to trace the underlying expression to the passage, and then from there you consider the complete sentence that contains the underlined expression that has been highlighted in the question section. So from there, you'll be able to trace the main verb that is in the main clause, because the entire expression that is underlined here is a subordinate clause. In other words, it's a what? A helping clause. That means there is a major clause that is combining with that underlined expression. So inside that major clause, you locate the word, the lexical verb. It is that lexical verb that is being modified. So when you go here, you're going to say, she addressed the crowd. So the main verb here is what? Addressed. Therefore, we will conclude that the function of this underlined expression is that it modifies the verb addressed in the main clause. It modifies the verb addressed in the main clause. That's the function. So that's how to state the function of adverbial phrases or clauses when they come in WAEC comprehension. Noun phrase / noun clause. What is a noun phrase and what is a noun clause? A noun phrase or a noun clause is simply what? A group of words that begins with a noun or a pronoun and functioning as the subject of a sentence or the object of a sentence and so on. A noun phrase is a group of words that begins with a noun or pronoun and functioning as the subject, the object, or a complement in a sentence. Okay, and the complement can be complement of object or complement of subject. That already brings us into the function of what? Of noun phrase and noun clause. Functions of a noun phrase or noun clause. The functions that a noun phrase or a noun clause can perform in an expression or in a sentence are already contained in our definition here. Cassava, subject, object, or complement. Now, noun phrases or noun clauses can perform so many functions, okay? But for the purpose of this discussion, and especially based on what normally comes in WAEC, okay, we are going to talk about 6 functions of a noun clause. And the function that a noun clause will perform in an expression will depend on the position that the noun is in that sentence. Based on the position that a noun occupies in a sentence, a noun phrase or noun clause can therefore serve as subject of a sentence or object of a sentence, or complement of the subject or complement of the object, or object of a preposition, and finally it can serve as what? A positive. So these are the 6 possible functions of what? Of a noun phrase / a noun clause. Now we are going to try to list them out and look at how they work. Now, I want to talk about how to identify the grammatical names and functions of expressions when they are what? Noun phrases or noun clauses. The position of the noun or the pronoun in the words in the sentence will determine the function. So, the first one we'll talk about here is when the noun or the pronoun is at the initial position. When the noun or pronoun is at the initial position, then the function of the expression is that of subject of the sentence. Now, let's consider an example to illustrate this. For example, we have the dog barked all through the night. So let's say the underlying part of this expression is the dog barked. Alright, so if this expression is given to you, that is this underlying part, and you are asked to state the grammatical name of the expression. The dog, it begins with what? The dog. Therefore, it's a noun material. Is it a noun phrase or noun clause? Does it have a verb? Yes, there's a verb, barked. So the dog barked is a noun clause. Alright, it's a noun clause. And because it is the noun that what begins the expression is at the initial part of the sentence, then the function is subject of the sentence. Now let's go to the next one. Number 2. When the noun occupies a position after the main verb. When the noun, okay, that starts the expression occupies a position after the main verb, then the function is object of the verb. Now, let's consider an example to illustrate this. Now, we have an expression before us. I will choose the easiest question. The easiest question here is a noun phrase or noun clause. Then we ask ourselves, does it contain a verb? No. The easiest question, easier is an adjective. So there is no verb in this expression. Therefore, it is a noun phrase. Then what is the function? We said when the position is after the main verb, then it is object of the verb. So what we have here is I will choose the easiest question. You can see that the entire underlined, okay, expression here, the entire underlined expression that is here is coming immediately after the verb. Therefore, it is what? Object of the verb. The function is object of the verb. Now, let's move forward to the next one. Number 3, position after a linking verb. A linking verb or an intensive verb. For example, you have is, are, or may, or can. So, when a noun appears after a linking verb, then the function is complement of the subject. Position after a linking verb, the function is complement of the subject. Now, let's consider an example to illustrate this. So, this is what we have. She is the best manager in this company. You can see a linking verb here. She is. So, the best manager in this company. This expression is a noun phrase or noun clause. You ask yourself, does this expression contain a verb? The best manager in this company. There's no verb in that expression. Best, okay, is an adjective. Manager is a noun. So there's no verb. Since there's no verb in this expression, this entire underlying part of the sentence is a noun phrase. And because it's coming afterwards, a linking verb, it is complement of the subject. Another way to understand complement of the subject is that the entire noun phrase or noun clause is describing the subject. So she is the best manager in this company. So this is what we're talking about. When the entire underlying expression comes after a linking verb like is or are or can or be, then it is complement of the subject. Let's go on to the next one. Number 4, position after the direct object. When the noun comes after a direct object, okay, then the function is complement of the object. Let us see what we mean. When a noun comes after a direct object, then the function is complement of the object. Now, let's have an example. This is what we have. I consider her my friend for life. It begins with my friend, therefore it is a noun phrase or noun clause. Does it contain a verb or does it contain a verb? There is no verb in this expression. Therefore, it is a noun phrase. Right. Because it is coming after the object of the sentence. The object is I consider her. The object is her. So because the noun that begins our expression is coming after the object, therefore we say it is complement of the object. In other words, the entire underlying expression here is adding information toward the object. We can put it in simple language and say it is working for the object. So that is that on that. We now move on to the next function. Case number 5. Okay? When the noun, okay, occupies a position after a preposition, then the function is object of a preposition. Position after a preposition, function, object of a preposition. This one says, we prefer a student from our former school. The underlined expression is our former school. Alright, now, our former school is a noun phrase because it does not contain a verb and it's coming after a preposition from. Therefore, the function of this noun phrase is object of a preposition. Now let's go to the next one. Now, the next one is a situation where the noun comes into a position where it renames another noun. When the noun, okay, that we are considering is renaming another noun, then the function is appositive. Let's have an example. Now, this is what we have. My father, the principal, has just arrived. This is a noun clause. It begins with a noun, the principal, and then it contains a verb, has just arrived. So it's a noun clause. The entire underlined expression is coming after another noun, okay? And the noun that starts the underline, okay, is renaming another noun. Therefore, this case is appositive in function. When a noun comes after another noun and renames the previous noun, then it is appositive in function. So these are the 6 common types of what? Noun phrases and noun clauses and their function that we commonly see in WAEC comprehension. Now let's go over past questions and see how we can identify the grammatical names and functions of expressions. WAEC 2014. While I was watching a 9 o'clock television network program. Okay, that is the underlined expression or what is given in the question section. But to answer the question correctly, you have to trace the underlined towards where it is used in the passage. And of course, I have brought all of that out in this place. Okay, so now the whole sentence reads thus. Then after a few months ago, 38 years after I last saw him in the primary school, while I was watching a 9 o'clock television network program, I saw David being interviewed by a team of reporters. Right. Now, what is the grammatical name that is given to this underlined expression? What word does it start with? It starts with what? While. And that is adverbial clause or phrase of time. Does the underlined expression have a verb? Yes. I was watching, okay? I was watching. So there is a verb in the underlined expression. Automatically, the complete grammatical name will become adverbial clause of time. While is an element of time, according to our analysis. So it is adverbial clause of time. That's the grammatical name. The next thing is to talk about its function. Alright? So, what is the function of this underlined expression while I was watching a 9 o'clock television program? Like we discussed in the course of our analysis, we said the entire expression, that is the underlined expression, is modifying the verb in the main clause. Now, with the way WAEC is bringing this question this year, you are going to look at the construction very well. That is, you're going to look at the sentence very well and ask yourself, which of these, because it looks like 3 arrangements here, okay, which of these 3 arrangements, okay, is going to be the main clause? Then you ask yourself, which of the 3 arrangements or 3 clauses here, all right, starts with a noun or a pronoun? It's very simple. Then after a few months ago, this one starts with then. So it is then is not what? It's not a noun, it's not a pronoun. So this is not the main clause. You can just rule this one out. Then after a few months ago, all of this is not the main clause. It's as well a subordinate clause. While I was watching is what we are considering. Then the other part of the sentence is I saw David. So this is the main clause because it begins with what? I. Finally, you will ask yourself, where is the main verb in this main clause? The lexical verb, which is the main verb in this main clause, is being interviewed. So we say it modifies the verb interviewed. So function, it modifies the verb interviewed. All right. WAEC was only being funny this very year, okay, by bringing a multiple sentence. Multiple sentence is one that has a main clause and two or more subordinate clauses. So students sometimes in a situation like that may find it difficult to identify the main clause, but don't forget, the main clause is always going to be the clause that starts with a noun or a pronoun. So all other clauses that are going to be arranged in the sentence, just undermine them and then go straight to the main clause and look for the main verb that is there and say that is the verb that the entire word, adverbial clause or phrase is modifying. So that is that on that. Let's go to the next one. WAEC 2018. Everybody was impressed with the feats which went along with the hilarious drumming. What we are considering here is which went along with the hilarious drumming. Very simple. Like we discussed under the adjectival phrasal clause, we said that they begin with which, who, whose, whom. So automatically this is adjectival clause of phrase. So you now ask yourself, does it contain a verb or it doesn't contain a verb? This expression contains a verb which went. So since a verb is present in this expression, it becomes adjectival clause. The next thing we now ask ourselves is, what is its function? Alright? And like we also discussed at the beginning of this video, we said that all adjectival clauses modify the words, the nouns that appears before them in sentences. So when you go back to the passage, as you trace the line back to the passage, like I've already brought out here for us, okay, you're going to discover that everybody was impressed with the feats. The feats, but if you don't know the meaning of feats per se, if a word is premodified by the, it is a noun. If a word is premodified by a or an, so the feats, so this is the noun. Automatically, you're going to say that it modifies the noun feats. So that is that on WAEC 2018. For the next one, we have WAEC 2019. At first, an uncle introduced me to working on other people's farms. But when I discovered that I could take care of myself, I worked even harder. So what we're considering here is that I could take care of myself. This year was a funny year as well, if I have to put it that way. Because the underlined expression which we are to name here, quite alright, starts with what? That. And that is misleading. It will easily push students into concluding that since it begins with that, and we have established that any expression that begins with which, whose, whom, or relative clauses as well as that is an adjectival, that this is going to be an adjectival clause. But look at it very well. I discovered that I could take care of myself. What is it coming after? That's what you will now ask yourself. It's coming after a verb, discovered. So from there, you will have to caution yourself that adjectival phrases or clauses do not come after verbs. So that will give you the first word, suspicion. If you are able to think that way, that is, that an adjectival clause cannot come after a verb, then you will need another formula, okay, that will help you to confirm this answer. And that formula is this: for all noun clauses, when you replace them with what? It's, the expression will make sense. So when you remove the underlined expression and replace it with it's, and it makes sense, then you know it is a noun clause. Of course, you know it's not adverbial because it doesn't start with any adverbial element here. So it's between noun clause or phrases, or adjective clauses or phrases. So let's replace the whole of this underline with it. At first, an uncle introduced me to working on other people's farms. But when I discovered it, I worked even harder. So you can see that when you replace the whole of this underline with it will make sense. Then automatically it's a noun clause. That is how to confirm noun clauses. Then you ask yourself, does it have a verb or does it have a verb? Could, take care, okay? Could take. It's a verb. So you conclude that it is what? Noun clause. So please take good note of this. Then what is the function? You now think about all the functions of what? Noun phrases and noun clauses that we discussed. Okay, we said when the underlined clause or phrase is coming after a verb, then it is object of a verb. Discovered is a verb. So it serves as object of the verb discovered. So that is that on WAEC 2019. Let's move forward. WAEC 2020. While the journey lasted, Mama chatted heartily with a fellow passenger who was also going to see her son in Lagos, and the two exchanged phone numbers. I think this one is a little bit straightforward because it begins with a relative pronoun who. Okay, therefore it's an adjectival phrasal clause and it contains a verb also going. So you conclude that it is adjectival clause. This one is an adjectival clause. Fine. Then what is the function? We say all adjectival clause modify the noun, okay, that comes before them. And the noun here is a fellow passenger. Okay, the noun is what? Passenger. So you write it modifies the noun passenger. So that is that on WAEC 2020. Let's take one more example. Then finally today we want to look at WAEC 2021. What I did not know, which the interviewer brought to light, was that she indeed studied agriculture in the university, had 3 children, and secured the support of a bank that loaned her some money, which she had since returned. All right, so I just brought out the whole of the sentence from the passage, okay? What is given to us under the question section is that she did study agriculture in the university. Like I told you before, you do anything or you consider the answer, make sure you trace the underlined expression to where it is underlined in the passage. Like the 2019 question that we have just considered, this expression is starting with what? That. Okay, which will mislead many students to think that it is adjectival phrasal clause. And like I explained in that example, I said an adjectival phrasal clause cannot come after a verb. So that will make you think of another formula that can help you to validate your answer or your claims. Like I explained on the 2019 question, the word here that starts with expression that is not adverbial in nature, so there's no adverbial clause that begins with that. So that will automatically make it to what? Or make you to suspect that it's a noun clause like we discussed on that 2019 question. Okay, so you replace this underline, the whole of this underline with it. If the reading makes sense, then automatically it's a noun clause. Okay? And so when we do that, you're going to have what I did not know, which the interviewer brought to light, was it. Had 3 children and secured as a result. So if it was it, then it makes sense to say it was it. So automatically you say it is what? Noun. Phrasal clause, he did study, there is a verb in it, so it is noun clause. So what is its function? Like we established under our discussion on noun phrasal clause, we said the function is going to be determined by the position of what? The noun in what? In the sentence. So you ask yourself, what's the position of this underlined expression? Okay, this underlined clause. What's the position of this underlined clause in this sentence? All right. To identify that, you can quickly look at what it is coming after. It's coming after was, and was is a linking verb. And we said that when the noun or the noun clause or phrase comes after a linking verb, then it is working for the word subject of the sentence. All right? And if it's working for the sentence, subject of the sentence, you conclude that it is what? Complement of the subject. So you're right. So this is how to identify grammatical names of expressions and to state their functions in WAEC comprehension.